Okay, let's see how this is going to go. Is it going to go? All right, are we live? Hello, welcome to the new year, 2025. I'm just going to run a couple of tests before we get started. But this is a live Q&A session. I'm just going to make sure everything's working good because I'm just here by myself running the stream. So I'm just bear with me while I just try to log on to YouTube myself just to make sure the audio's working properly, so that people can hear me. So what we're going to be talking about today, excuse me, is motivation for the new year. Okay, have we got? Is it working? What's going on? Let me see. I was on my page, and now I'm not on my page. How powerful is that? Here we go. We can see it. All right, let's have a look. I've got to watch an ad from my own channel to check this stuff out. So I hope this is a good time for people. Let's just have a listen. Okay, we got it. Perfect. The thing I hate the most is if the audio isn't working well enough or it's not clear. So once people jump on, please let me know. I've got my AC running, so if it's too loud for you with that noise, just let me know. So I've got my little whiteboard in the background. We're going to be talking about 5 elements and motivation for the new year. And I'm also going to be answering questions. So usually, because I don't have, I don't do these as often as I should, it takes people a while to jump in the stream and all the rest of it. So feel free to drop in your questions. They don't have to be about this topic. They could be about any topic about Chinese medicine. And I'll do my best to answer your questions. This is like just a live Q&A. So welcome to 2025. I'm very excited about this year. I feel like it's going to be good. I mean, having said that, I remember saying the exact same thing on 2020. Like, I was like, oh, 2020 is going to be such an awesome year, such a great year. And I was very excited. I'm basically excited about every year, no matter what the year is. But I do, obviously, we've been through a lot of stuff in the last 5 years in the world. And I feel like this year there's a bit of a turnaround in those things. And particularly in the health space. So, what's going on in the US, I think that's going to revolutionize the way that I hope that it's going to have a flow on to the effects in Australia, in terms of like corruption in industries. And I'm talking about like hidden ingredients. Well, they're not hidden, but they are sort of hidden. Hard to find ingredients in packaging and things like that are damaging to people's health, and I'm excited about those kinds of things. Anyway, so let's think about motivation and Chinese medicine. If you are dropping into the chat, if you are coming into the stream, you can also just leave a chat to say hi, where you're from, have a wave, that kind of thing. That's cool. So yeah, this is something that we try to conjure up or get, I guess, motivation. So I'm going to put a few things on my little whiteboard here. Right. So how are we going to get, I don't know if you can see that. Let's see if you can see that. Classic Marie, don't. Let's just see if I can come in a bit closer. You can still see me. There you go. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to think about motivation, and it's really just about the 5 elements. So I'm not going to write a lot of stuff on this board. I just want you to get a visual picture of the elements. So we have wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. So wood, fire, earth, and then metal and water. You won't need to even see this too much. It's just more to have that visual representation of them going around in that circle. If you've followed any videos that I've done before, you would see that circle. You would know what that means. And in Chinese medicine, they call that the generating cycle. So it's like each in turn generates each other. The video I did put out yesterday on depression actually has quite a lot of information about this. And that's what sort of sparked my idea to do this video, because I thought, well, it's not, you don't have to be depressed to kind of get the benefit of that kind of education, I guess. And we can all get into a state of, I wouldn't say depressed, but just feeling not there. Like you feel like my mojo's not there. I feel flat. I don't feel, ready to rock and roll. So at any point you can put the questions in the stream, that's fine. And I will answer some other questions not about this topic as well, but I always like to have a topic to kind of start with because people might be jumping into this later on, I guess, or whatever. Get the conversation going. So we're thinking about wood as the primary thing, right? That is where motivation comes from. So the concept of life planning, direction in life, seeing yourself in the future, having a plan. So if you might have a friend that says, they just always have that 5-year plan or that 10-year plan, and you're like, man, how can you see so far ahead, or even a bigger plan? Those people probably have a very strong wood element going on, right? They had that wood element aspect, which is in all of us, okay? So it's not like that's special for that person, but we all have that ability to have that is particularly strong. And one of the things we can kind of do to learn or to help ourselves with these things is get around other people that are good at those things and ask them how they are, how do they get to that place, like how learn from them, just as much as they can kind of learn from you about your traits and your things that you're good at. So let's think about motivation, right? You want to have the ability to kind of do something, and there's part of it is momentum. Once that's going, it can be easier to generate that. So before we get to motivation, we kind of have to have the will, which is the water, right? And it's not a Chinese medicine saying, but where there's a will, there's a way, right? So that's kind of where it starts, right? The will, the the will, and the wood, the movement. I've put motivation there in case you can't read that. So we kind of think about let's think about how could we get that will, right? You have to know that you want that thing. But let's say you do. Let's say you think, I just don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want my life to be as, sad as it is, or I would like things to be better, or I would like something to change. And if you don't know how to go about that change, I'm going to give you something that's from psychology that's very powerful, that is a tool you can kind of draw from. But if you're at that point where it's all too hard and you've got no inkling of anything, this video may help you, or you may need to see a practitioner, not necessarily a Chinese medicine practitioner, but someone who either A, can kind of talk to you, so a counselor, a psychologist, some kind of mental health professional that can help you do that. Even a life coach, that kind of thing could help with this. On where do I start, right? But there's a concept in Chinese medicine about the interconnection between our physical body and our emotional body. So if we do things in the physical, that can then generate the emotional or help the emotional. So in this case, there's two things I would suggest you do, and they're like in opposition, but they would help each other. So movement is going to stimulate wood, but stillness is going to stimulate water. So water's the precursor, that's the will. Now, what is stillness, right? Okay, I used to get really annoyed when people say, I live in stillness. I'm like, well, how do you get around every day? How do you go about your business? Like, that's stupid. I still am very skeptical of these sort of new agey sort of movements. But then as I get older, I realize, like, okay, there's some wisdom in some of that stuff as well. It's just how it's packaged might not be for me. I'm not their target market. So what does that mean? It means like stopping your mind from just being, I don't know, bamboozled by just BS stuff, like scrolling on TikTok, like watching video after video. I find myself doing that on YouTube because I tend to be more of a person that watches a lot of YouTube than anything else. But you like being in that in something that's just filling up the mind for no apparent reason, right? No purpose for you. Just turn my aircon off. It's getting a bit cold and dry in here on this hot summer's day. So some kind of stillness. Now, water is associated with the water element. Oh, that's surprising. Pearl of wisdom there. But what is water, right? So here's a cup of water, and that can kind of be represented as stillness. But think about the flexibility of water, right? The movement of water. Water can be really powerful. Like, it can actually generate electricity, right? It's used to do that. Now, that's out of my purview of explaining how that happens, but it does happen. Water is a powerful force. So it's not just sort of like this wishy-washy, I'll just sit in stillness, do nothing, and my goals and dreams will just come to me. It's not that. There might be a need for some of that stillness to wait for something to arise in that stillness, especially if you are a person that just doesn't allow for that at all. But how could you do that? You could just do that by just doing one thing. So focusing on breathing. Oh, my computer's making a giant sound. Focusing on your breathing. Focusing on sitting in a meditative state, going for a walk. I like to do that in my walk sometimes. You don't have to have 100 other people. I mean, I'm a podcaster right now. You don't have to have a podcast in your ears at all times. Having moments of that or parts of that, somewhat in that reflective state, but you're not really trying to think of anything necessarily. That's going to be more the earth element that we're doing that for. It's just allowing the space to be there and being in that space. One of the practices that fosters this is actually yoga. So particularly what's called yin yoga. You're lying there and you've just got, that's literally what yin is. It's like stillness, and it's trying to focus on that. So I would encourage you to go on somewhere like YouTube and find a yin yoga practice. They're very easy to do. Get a bunch of pillows and things like that. Now, when I say it's easy, it's actually not. Like, I find that the hardest of all the workouts to do, because that's not me. And I force myself to do that sometimes because I know it's good for you, right? To lie in that stillness. So that can be part of it. Now, being around bodies of water, let's say being around the ocean, being around a lake, a dam, even having the sound of water for some people, that stimulates that, right? You might cozy up to the sound of rain. That could be helpful. So those things could be used as perpetuators for that moment of stillness. Acupuncture also can help in this way. So if a patient came to me and said, I need help to get motivated, what would I do? Now, one of the points you could use is kidney 3. It's on your ankle. So if I can try and draw this little picture here, I'm just going to see if that will come out. Yeah, so this is my terrible foot. This is, toes are kind of there. The inside of your foot. This little thing is called the medial malleolus, which is the back ankle bones. This is on the inside of your foot, not the outside. And you have a point that's kind of just right there where I put this. I'll put it in red. So what you could do is you can just rub your ankles in that area with your thumb and your finger. And then your thumb might be on the outside or the inside, depending on what's easiest for you. You have a point on the other side called bladder 60. So you could use that acupressure as part of your stillness practice, let's say, to help stimulate that. So if I had a patient that came to me, back to that story, that said, I am, struggling with motivation, I would be looking within these 5 elements, what's out of balance for them, try to bring that back into balance, and then the motivation should naturally come to them. So that's kind of what you would want to do for yourself if you're watching this and you're thinking, I just want a bit of self-help. Sometimes it's expensive to see a practitioner, or you want to enhance what the practitioner is doing. So you might go and have an acupuncture session and think, wow, I felt really great after that. And another thing that acupuncture will do for many people is it creates that sense of calm, like all the chaos in their mind or the things they were thinking of prior to the session are sort of like just suddenly go away. And they're like, oh, shit, I didn't know I was feeling like that until I felt the opposite of that, until I felt so calm. So it can be used like that. And then after your session, right, rather than just going about your day, if this is possible, you would then maybe go home or somewhere that you feel peaceful in and maybe do a bit of journaling or write that or think about, what do I really want for my life? And there would things to do. Okay, so that's one way we could try to generate motivation. And then you're kind of thinking. You've got to think about, what do I want to do before you're going to get the motivation to do it. And that is in turn that, like, life planning, thinking of something to do, knowing what you want to do. That's all part of that would, right? The other way you can do this is directly stimulate would by just doing exercise, any movement, right? So it could be going for a walk, whatever is you're able to do with the physicality of your body. So if you're super fit and you already do a lot of exercise, you know what works for you, so I'm not going to give you medical advice about what kind of exercise you should do, but some kind of movement is kind of needed to do. I'm just putting my aircon back on because it got hot again. It's so weird here. We're in the middle of summer in Perth today, in Perth now, so it's kind of that's what I know. Most of the people watching this channel are in the US or the UK, so they're probably in the cold already, in the winter. So yeah, we want to stimulate the wood element directly. Now that would be just doing some kind of exercise. Now if you do exercise and then that's your time you feel the most inspirational, the most creative spark, the best, that's a good sign that you're in a state of health, for one, like, because if you were weak and deficient, you wouldn't have the energy to do that kind of exercise and you wouldn't feel good from it, for sure. So that's a good sign. And as you do that exercise, you would kind of hopefully maybe some ideas would come to you, or some thoughts, or you would plan a time after that to sit there and do that. Now, how can you do that? Journaling is one, like you just let yourself free flow write. You could do it by audio. Sometimes people aren't great at writing, or they don't feel like good at that. Sometimes I use the notes on my phone. I'm just driving in my car and I just put the recorder on. Obviously I'm not pressing any buttons while I'm driving. I put it on before I leave the parking lot or whatever, and I will just talk into my phone about the ideas. Now sometimes I use that, sometimes I don't, but the fact that I've recorded it, I feel like it's safe and secure there. But you're just literally talking it out to yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we talk it out to a friend, and that could be part of it. So there's another little thing I want to let you know about how to give you motivation. This thing is really powerful, but it's not a Chinese medicine directly, but I'll give you how it relates to Chinese medicine. So just for people that are coming into the stream, if you have a question, feel free to ask a question. It doesn't have to be about this topic. Happy New Year. We're talking about answering. I want to answer your questions, but whenever I do these streams, sometimes it takes an hour for people to jump in, and then I don't want to run out of voice or anything like that. I guess not that would happen. I wouldn't run out of voice. Run out of my own motivation. So I'll bring a topic like this. That's why we're talking about something. If you have a question about this topic, it could be about that as well. So let's think about, we'll get rid of this kidney-free part here. Right. So there's a concept called self-determination theory in psychology, and this was proposed or talked about or decided, I guess, or invented by these two psychologists, Edward Deci and Ryan. I can't remember the first name of the guy. So he proposed that firstly, there's a premise that autonomous motivation is the best type of motivation versus controlled motivation. So what is autonomous motivation, right? It's motivation that's wholehearted, of your own volition. And so it's going to be choiceful. It's going to be enjoyable. So you want to do it. And it's going to be also enjoying, technically, autonomous motivation. When you're fully, completely autonomously motivated, you are enjoying that activity for the sake of doing the activity. Whereas controlled motivation, in opposite to that, is that you do the activity for either a reward or to avoid a penalty. So what is that? A speeding fine is a great example. Most countries have speeding fines, right? So the government or the authorities or whatever want people to drive at a certain speed to keep things safe. So they set that speed limit, right? All these things are created and made up, of course. And then they say, if you exceed that speed limit, you'll get a fine. Now, they are trying to enforce that rule because of a good intention, right? so they put that limit there, and then they'll say, they could say, if you adhere to the limit, we'll give you a reward. Now, hands up if any countries do that. Who gives a reward for driving within the limit? So, very, very strangely, and when I tell this story, no one ever believes me, but trust me, this is true. Like, I was driving along once and I just got my license. I had a really old car and I was always worried the police were going to pull me over for something, right? You know, like there was nothing wrong with it explicitly, but you know, when you've got an old car, something can be wrong and you don't even know, especially when you first get your license. You're a female, you don't know much about cars, you know, whatever, like the backlights. Like once I left a funnel inside the oil thing and I didn't put the oil on, and the police had pulled me over for something, and they're like, oh, we need to check your car. So I lifted up the bonnet and oil had gone all over the bonnet of the car. And they could see that the funnel was still sticking in the oil thing. And, like, they just let me off because they could see I was a ditz idiot. Yeah, the police guy just gave me his number to call him for later to get it inspected. And then my uncle, who's a policeman, said that was probably just for a date. Anyway, I never called the guy back, right? But this time I got pulled over on a very, very misty road and I was like, oh no, what's going on? You know, and the drivers gave me a driving safety award. That was something that was done in cahoots with some kind of like RAC or company or something like that. And they basically said, you know, you can, like we noticed that you were driving slowly in the fog and that was good. And we awarded you this. It was just a little, I don't even still have it, like some paper. And when I told everyone, my friends, they were like, what? That didn't happen. And I was like, yeah, it did happen. I didn't like hallucinate. It did happen. Anyway, I can see someone's got a question there, Tiffany. I'm going to answer yours in a sec. I'll just finish this little part of this thing. So autonomous motivation, right, is doing something because you want to, like but controlled motivation is doing something to, you often avoid a punishment. So like, yeah, that speeding, the road safety, most of the time they put a punishment there. So you're driving safely or less speedily or whatever it is to avoid a fine. You don't get a reward if you do the right thing. You get a punishment if you do the wrong thing. So when we're thinking about like things we want to do for the new year, we want to do weight loss, we want to do moving, we want to do, you know, like as in moving as in exercise or do something, then we often it's like, I want the reward. I want, as in, I don't want to do the exercise or the healthy diet. I just want to lose the weight. I want the reward of people saying, "Oh, you look great today, Marie," or feeling good in your body or whatever it is, right? So, like it's easy. It's possible to get results with that kind of motivation, and every day people do that, and I do that for myself, right? Like, marking assignments, for instance, like sometimes you start an activity because I've got a deadline, and if I don't meet that deadline, you know, some kind of punishment would happen to me. Now, it's not like a corporal punishment or anything like that, but it's like, you know, someone in your organization might not, you might not look as good as you should look to them. Maybe that's the avoidance of a punishment, right? We're getting into psychology here, so there can be lots of reasons for these things, that why we do things. If you understand why you do something, it'll be easier to work out what your motivations are and how you can do more of that stuff, right? So Edward Deci and Ryan sort of proposed that controlled motivation is good, but it's not as good as autonomous motivation. And then they say in their writings and their texts and things like that, that you need 3 things to have autonomous motivation. And they have actually proposed that if you don't have these 3 things, you will not be able to have autonomous motivation. And these are really important. I'm going to talk about how they relate to the 5 elements here. So the 3 things for autonomous motivation, right? So that means you're kind of doing something willingly and choicefully because you want to do it, and ultimately you're going to enjoy that activity more than just, you're not doing it for the result or the avoidance of the result. So the 3 things are relatedness, competence, and autonomy, right? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about this question, and then we might come back to that because autonomy in itself, relatedness, and competence. So we'll come back to this little section. All right. So I don't know how to put these on the screen because I don't have a thing to do that, but we're going to answer this first question. Let me see if I can. I'm not using a program that does this. Someone says, hi. Awesome. You got a nice channel name with a it's a symbol. That's awesome. Tiffany Jones says, hello. I've been dealing with several ailments related to metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high triglycerides. Can you provide any herbs or how to manage or reverse it? Okay. So, firstly, I'm not your practitioner, but I'll kind of explain, so I can't give individual advice, like do this, do that, right? That's really important. Chinese medicine's a very nuanced, individualized system. So you could have this question, 5 other people could have this question, and the herbs and certainly the herbs and the acupuncture treatment would be different, but for each person, right? Because their pulses would be different. How they got to that state is going to be slightly different, but there are common patterns of disharmony. So in Chinese medicine, we call those things patterns of disharmony. So how would a Chinese medicine practitioner think about this kind of stuff? So firstly, we don't treat those things as such, right? Now, you could know if you had high blood pressure, that's an easy thing to measure. You could measure it, your practitioner, any practitioners these days can measure that. But with these other things like your high triglycerides and things like that, you would need to go back to a Western medicine doctor to measure that. You won't know if those things are changing based on any kind of treatment or personal interventions unless you go and have those things tested, right? Whereas if a patient comes to see me and said all of that sort of stuff, the next question I would have is, well, what symptoms do you have? Now, I'm not saying please don't put those all in this chat because we don't want to, one is we can't do a consult obviously over YouTube, but you don't want to share too much personal information over YouTube. I think that's not great. So there's a back and forward has to take place. And I do this channel because I want people to kind of understand how Chinese medicine thinks about things. One is try to give you as much stuff as we can that's personal help, self-help, things you can do for yourself, because there's so much in Chinese medicine you can do for that. But also to understand, like, hey, a practitioner kind of has to help you. So if you know you have blood deficiency, or you know you have qi stagnation, or you know you have yang deficiency, that's kind of the next stage. And then all the self-help stuff can kind of come, excuse me, into that. So let me think about this. It's hard for me to make it's hard for me to answer some of these questions as well, because it's not that I don't know what to say. It's that in Australia we have really big restrictions on claims of treatment, right? So claiming that it can do something, claiming that herbs or acupuncture can treat a certain thing. So none of these things I can talk about and say, we can treat this. We can't, so you've asked this question, can we reverse it? I technically can't even say we can treat it. This channel is educational. So I'm trying to educate people how a practitioner would think about this. And certainly patients with these kinds of things would come to me and come to other practitioners with this. So that's just kind of my little disclaimer for my APRA stuff, in a way, right? So I'm not trying to claim that we can treat these things. So it comes down to the symptoms that you have as to knowing what pattern of disharmony that is. And then in Chinese medicine, we're trying to rectify that pattern of disharmony. So in type 2 diabetes, I'll talk a little bit about what happens in the 5 elements, and how we would know that is by the symptoms that you have. So often people say I have a slow metabolism, a sluggish metabolism, I put on weight, they get puffy, and you generally have 2 types of constitutional people that you'll see in this scenario. One is people that are very big and puffy, or Awesome. Put a little bit more information there. We'll get to that in a sec. Great. If people are very big and puffy, they tend to be often have a water metabolism issue. It might not be dampness as such, right? But just if water's not properly transformed, it's going to lead to a damp scenario. But before that, or even just as part of that, and that's, it makes sense, it's going to be the water element, but it's the ability of yang to transform the water. So often I see patients who are, they're actually yang deficient. And when they get on yang tonic herbs, now those herbs, that you cannot take those by yourself. You cannot, I would not tell you what those herbs are, because it's quite dangerous if people take it inappropriately. There's a step-by-step process usually that patients have to go through to get their body ready to take those herbs. But once they're on those kinds of yang tonics, they tend to do much better. And what we're trying to do is get your body to transform the water and get your water element to kind of work better. And that's a very classical Chinese medicine perspective on it. In TCM, they'd often just say it's part of the earth, the dampness, right? You're puffy, you're damp, that kind of thing. And if the more damp a person is, or the more yang deficient they are, the more their bowels will tend to be looser and incomplete, or just more frequent. It could be formed and stuff. If there's inflammation in your body, particularly in your intestines, it's like sometimes people have diarrhea, very loose, and then they're going a lot, and then they're not going, and then they're blocked, and that's also can be water metabolism, because it's like their body isn't able to moisten the stools properly, so it's either so moist that it's loose, or it's so dry that their body's not able to moisten it, and so it's dry and pebbly and hard to get out. One herb, and I've mentioned this a lot on the channel because it's quite a useful herb that people can use, and I don't think you could take this herb and have too much detriment from it. It's one of those herbs is ginger, right? So fresh ginger. It's easy to get. You can buy it from the supermarkets. You can grow it yourself in your garden. And if you kind of want to strengthen the earth, which if you had to put the pancreas somewhere, it would be in that earth element, right? So you want that stomach to be able to function as best as it can. Then firstly, ginger would help with that, especially if there's nausea, like if there's any sort of feeling sicky after eating and stuff like that. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because you think about, New Year, and also look, people want to just fix their body, right? I'm searching for the cure. I'm searching for the thing that's going to help me. But often the thing that's going to help you is the thing you don't do, the thing you take away, and the thing you stop doing. And there's heaps of stuff in life that we could probably all stop doing. that are not optimal for you. So you have to then ask yourself how, and this comes back to the thing about the motivation, right? How badly do I want to be better? That's going to inform how motivated you will be to make any changes in your life, right? I'm more and more convinced that we have so much toxicity in our food chain that foods are a massive cause of illness. Now in Chinese medicine, that's a big part of things. There's a saying that says when a patient comes to you, you should use diet and lifestyle first. If that doesn't work, then use medicine. I don't know any practitioners in my field, that do that. Like even me, I've never seen a patient, and this is what I've been challenging myself with lately. I've never seen a patient and said, do these changes. I'm not going to give you anything until you do those changes, and then we'll see what that does, and then you come back and see me. I'm saying this to myself just as much as to people watching this, but yeah, it's a challenge, right, to do that, because one is patients want to get a result. The things that you take away, things you do for yourself. Now, you might have things that you need to treat. I'm not saying, I've got a patient with a back pain. I say, go on this anti-inflammatory diet and, all your dreams will come true. It takes time for the diet and lifestyle stuff to work in many cases. But yeah, all kind of like sugars and carbohydrates are just really not great. I don't think we should be having sugars in our diet at all. I don't see that like sugar was ever used as a food in it's pretty clear that sugar was used as a medicine in the Han Dynasty, and that means it probably wasn't a food. They wouldn't have been given, like there's formulas with sugar in it, Yitung, which is maltose, and they were giving that to people like not willy-nilly every day or anything, but it was listed as a medicinal substance. So that means that like it was probably not that easy to come by. It wouldn't have been part of people's diets. Certainly people in the Han Dynasty weren't cooking Chinese food like we cook Chinese food now, where you've got all these sauces with all these added flavors and all, you know. So I'm not, obviously most people watching this channel don't eat Chinese food, but like I've just been trying to think about this stuff. What would have people eaten then, and what is a healthy diet and all that sort of stuff. And there's just so much corruption in grains in our industry, in you know, genetically modified grains, so that they can grow better, they're pesticide resistant, all that sort of stuff. And even with the pesticides and glyphosate all aside, that modification of the grains makes them more of an irritant in our body, not as beneficial in our body. So I don't want to get into the whole like modification of grains, but like even there's a part about wheat, right, where there's a wheat seed where when wheat's ground into flour, it can go moldy, and they found that if they took this like little part of the wheat off, then when they grind it into the flour, it doesn't go moldy as easily. So that's what they've been doing with flour all this time. That's why flour lasts for so long, and you hardly get weevils in flour these days and things like that. Like little bugs in flour and stuff like that. It's like it shouldn't actually last even as long as it does. Yeah. So it's like they're taking out this thing, and if that thing caused mold, that's part of the life force of the plant. It's like, you know, that and that. Anyway, so I'm getting more and more convinced that plants are not great for us to be eating in maybe any form. In a way, like, yeah, people know that I've done the carnivore diet. I've just gone back on carnivore this year. And one of the things that I think is it's just very hard for people to avoid a lot of additives in foods. And that all causes these things that you're talking about, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the insulin resistance, all this kind of stuff, right? So one way to manage that stuff is to firstly remove all irritants from your body as best as you can. So you have to kind of go onto an elimination diet. Now, before I did carnivore, I used to do this for people in my clinic, but not with meat as the main food. So if you're really committed to see if food causes it, you need to pick something that's like not irritating, as in the least likely to irritate you, and you live on that for a week or 2 weeks, and then you add things in. Now, it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard. It's hard, because what am I going to eat when I go out? What am I going to eat when I do this? What about alcohol? What about this? What about coffee? What about all these things? So again, autonomous motivation is the best kind of motivation, rather than someone telling you you've got to do this and following, not, pardon the pun intended, your gut health, like your gut instinct to do those things. So I definitely think from a Chinese medicine perspective, taking things out is a better way to go than adding things in necessarily, right? If there's things to take out, I don't know your scenario, so maybe you've already got a really clean diet and that you've tried all of that stuff, and that's great. Good on you if that's happened, right? So then Tiffany says, I've been told I have all those before. Maybe thinking about the dampness and the water metabolism stuff. Blood and qi deficiency, as well as dampness and heat, right? Yeah, so blood deficiency, and I have this kind of thing often with my students in Chinese medicine. I'm like, make sure the diagnosis is right. It's, you know, you've got to have the parameters to make that diagnosis. So if people have blood deficiency, they're going to have something going on with their skin, probably easy get skin conditions or dry skin or pale skin, lightheadedness, Cycle not great. Something issue with your cycle, menstrual cycle, right? Lots of things could go wrong there. Not enough blood to make a proper period, even heavy periods, that kind of stuff, like bleeding too much. All that sort of stuff could happen, or some of that stuff, not all of it at once, hopefully. This idea of heat is often in TCM, they think of it as heat. In classical Chinese medicine, it can be heat, but more often than not, it still is heat, but it's your body's yang, it's weak yang kind of floating. So especially if it's like a hot flushing feeling or a wave of heat, afternoon, you know, or you've got a narrow range of temperature where you feel like, yeah, I've got to, you know, it's got to be 22 degrees. It can't be too warm. It can't be too... That is generally blood deficiency sort of thing, where a person doesn't like too much cold and they don't like too much heat, that kind of stuff. So in that case, like, meat is the best thing to treat blood deficiency, okay? The different kinds of meats, slow cooked meats is really good if your digestion is you find it hard to digest meat for some reason. Collagen filled bone broth, like bone broth is full of collagen. That's a great food to tonify blood. I've got other things on there. So if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, then that could be the cause of the blood deficiency, right? This is getting less and less popular in Chinese medicine because people like to be really inclusive, which is nice, but at the same time, they kind of moderate the advice that they give and things like that and say, oh, you can treat blood deficiency without meat. No, you can't. I'm sorry, but you can't. Like, you can't. We can help people with blood deficiency, but we can't, like, in Chinese medicine, we try to treat the cause of it. So it doesn't mean going down to Macca's and having a lot of hamburgers and stuff like that. It just means having the highest quality or just plain meat, rather than not, like, you know, kebab skewers that are kind of covered in sauces and, you know. So from a dampness treating and trying to help your earth element perspective, I would focus on what we call a clear, bland diet, which is just reducing the extras of everything as best as you can. So nothing from a packet. Okay, no 2-minute noodles or sauces or any of these kind of like bits and pieces like that, right? That will help you. If you're doing any of that, that will help you significantly. Then secondly, like reducing the amount of flavors that you put into foods when you cook them and allowing the flavor of that natural food to shine out. And this is often why, like, if you think about, you know, carnivore diet versus Chinese medicine, like, well, not a Chinese medicine diet, but any other diet including plants, the bitter flavors of plants, we were often using other ingredients to cover up those flavors, whereas if you're just eating meat, you don't need to cover up those flavors, because the flavor itself is, in Chinese medicine, the flavor of most meats is warm and sweet. Well, warm isn't a flavor, but the nature is warm. And why I think meat is good for people, well, definitely for people on blood deficiency, that are blood deficient, but in general, meat is full of yang. So it's the highest yang tonic food that we have to give you. In herbal medicine, meat is used as foods. Like in the Han Dynasty I talked about, there's a formula, and it's still used today. It's called Xiao Jianzong Tang, and that contains maltose or sugar, right? There is also formulas that were given to people after they've given birth, which was like a lamb shank or some kind of meat, stewed up meat with dangui, like boiled meat with a blood tonic herb called dangui. So they're things you can try, but I think the meat by itself is enough. Like, you don't have to cook the meat with herbs. Like, you can just have the meat if you weren't having the meat before. You don't need to have the herbs with the meat. Now, I'll give you a herb you can try to cook with. It's called dangui. I'm going to write it in the chat. So dangui is one thing. I'm trying to suggest herbs that are easy-ish to get. Now, it's obviously not as easy to get as ginger. You can't just buy it from any supermarket, any old place. But most Chinese food shops, that's what I call them, like Chinese oriental supermarkets, things like that, you can usually find this dangui. I find it's got a soupy flavour. Now, I used to be a vegetarian. I was a vegetarian for 9 years, and I started being vegetarian when I was really young, probably 16, something like that. Like, I just could not stomach animals. One of my pets had died, and it was just a trigger of, like, you know, I was already not feeling great about eating animals. If, you know, circumstances had drifted me there, I would have easily become a greenie or something like that, right? I was like going to those protest marches to stop, you know, some kind of whale stuff or whatever, like, you know, as you do when you're 16 years old, right? And then I started Chinese medicine, and I remember one of my teachers saying, "Oh, you'll become a meat eater," and I was like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, everyone who does China," he goes, "you won't last being a vegetarian." I was like, "Yes, I will." You know, my strong will was like, "Yes, I will. You'll never change me." And, you know, you go through this stuff, like what I'm telling people here. If you're a vegan or a vegetarian listening to this, you're probably like, yeah, you hate listening to it, right? Because you like, tell me how to do it without the meat. Anyway, years later, I, you know, changed my mind. I was vegetarian. I know I was vegetarian for 9 years. I remember counting it. And it would have been 2005, actually, because I remember this was the second time I'd been to China, and I was like, I'm going to eat meat now. I just had made that decision before I went to China, and I was like, okay, it'll be easier for me to change my ways where no one's around. And I think the first thing I had was a Chinese KFC. Right? It was terrible, mate. And I was friends with one of the doctors there from my first trip in 2001, and we'd gone out for dinner, and I said to him, "Oh, I'm going to be eating meat now." Something like I must have said, "I'm eating meat now." And like, this was literally my day, the day 2 of me ever touching meat, thinking about meat. And it took me at least 2 or 3 years after deciding I was going to eat meat to even be able to put a steak in my fridge or cook a steak. I used to go out and just have a steak once a week. Like, it wasn't, you know, so I totally understand how it's like, meat used to just gross me out. Like, I was like, I couldn't touch it, I couldn't smell it, I couldn't be around it. Like, ew. Anyway, so I told this doctor friend, I said, "Oh, I'm eating meat now," or something like that, you know, because his English isn't great or whatever. And next thing you know, he orders up all these dishes, like chicken heads, like, you know, all the Chinese stuff that they love to eat, you know, like, and I was like, whoa, back it off. Like, I was like, it's like literally my second day of trying. Like, I wanted to eat meat. I knew it was healthy for me to do it, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I just told him, "Oh, I'm eating meat now," and he ordered up all these things, and I was like, well, I just swallowed the sometimes when you're eating Chinese food, it's better to just eat it and not look at what you're eating. Anyway, like, if you've ever, like, it's just, you'd only ever see that if you've gone to China. Like, you're just eating a dish, and then suddenly like a fucking whole chicken head pops up at you. It's like, ooh, I still can't get over that. And I don't eat the chicken claws or any of that sort of stuff. But what I'm getting at is, I understand it's hard for people, but that is a big part of blood deficiency. Okay, so collagen, bone broth, like those things are really going to be game changers to kind of repair your body. So that's good. And then the more you can support your spleen and stomach with the right stuff, the dampness will just naturally go away. And if it doesn't, that's when herbs or acupuncture could kind of be used to kind of strengthen the spleen. But it's like you're trying to strengthen the spleen. Like, the best example is a pot plant, right? So if you've got a pot plant and you overwater it, that's causing dampness. Now, the remedy for that is to put that pot plant out in the sun, or drain the pot plant. So have some holes and let the water drain out. But even if you let the water drain out, some is still stuck in there. And what will happen is it's going to create mold there, and the plant will die just from too much water. That's dampness, too much overwater. So we put it out in the sun. So it's like someone putting the plant out in the sun, but not poking the holes, and then but still they keep on watering it too much, but they put it out in the sun. So you're kind of like using the medicine, the acupuncture or the herbs, to strengthen your spleen. That's putting it out in the sun. But all the meanwhile, you go home and you eat, you know, bags of chippies and whatever that's causing the dampness. I'm not saying that's you, but, you know, it can happen where it might not be bags of chippies. It could just be, you know, food that you love to eat that's dampening. So anything processed, all sauces and extra flavorings, all that sort of stuff, like reducing that down kind of creates what in Chinese medicine they call a clear, bland diet. And that just makes things like much, much more easier to digest. So one is we're trying to support the earth, the spleen and stomach, by taking all the pressure off of it. And in the second way, then try to put the healthy food in, which what you need if you are blood deficient, you need as much meat as you can take, right? So you that's kind of good. Eggs is another food, a super great food. If you're a vegetarian and you can eat eggs, I just eat more eggs, because that's going to help. Like they're much more full of yang than any other food, so they're warm natured, and yeah, that's great. So that's what I would advise you to kind of do. Self moxa is something you could try, like get your practitioner to help you to learn how to do that. Moxibustion, it's called. You can buy various implements to kind of help you do the moxa, and some practitioners are more open than others to kind of show their patients how to do it. Now, I sometimes don't show some of my patients because it's a dangerous thing. They can burn themselves, and if you feel like a person might do that, they might not be competent to do that. It might not be a wise thing to do. But moxa is a warming treatment, and it's used a lot in China as a self-help treatment. So there's some things you can kind of do for yourself to support that pattern of disharmony, right? So that I wouldn't worry about treating the heat directly, because if you do these other things, the heat itself will kind of resolve, unless you've got proper external heat, which means it wouldn't be lasting all this time. For one, it would be something that's like a TCM practitioners often say heat, your liver chi stagnation leading to heat, or heat rising, or something like that. The heat rising is your own body's yang. So if you restore that function down below, like your digestion gets better, your gut health gets better, which is like your small intestine, that heat will kind of come down into that. Yep. That's the idea. And that's what the moxa does. You're warming this area down here to get the heat to kind of come away from that area. Awesome. I hope that's been helpful for you. If other people have a question, then you're welcome to get my chair, because I've been standing all this time here at my desk. So we're talking about autonomous motivation. If there aren't any other questions, I'll just finish off that topic, right? Because I really think that's a good thing to cover in this episode. Part of self-determination theory, and this is great for any kind of motivation. So even what we were talking about just now about, how do I motivate myself to do these things, to quit carbs, right? It's not easy to get started with that. So how do we get to the place where it would be easier? So DC and Ryan kind of said you need these three things, and I'll put this in the chat. Relatedness, that's one. Competence and autonomy. Because I don't know if you can see this screen thing behind me that I've made. Anyway, I can't bring it forward because it's leaning on the back wall there, and I don't want everything to come crashing down. So what is relatedness? Relatedness is that you have a sense of being cared for in your world, in your, wherever you are, like in your community, in your household. It's a sense of being connected. It's a sense of belonging, right? And what that does for you is it helps you when you try to make changes. You have a support, right? So you're not in a state of fighting for, your existence, your being, right? Now, this isn't something that's easy to just get that, but it is something that this is why it's important to foster good relationships in your life, so that when you need them, when you go through a difficult time, those people are kind of there. So relatedness essentially means this. So if you can answer this for yourself, that means you have relatedness in your life. It means you matter to others and others matter to you. You matter to others and others matter to you. So what that means is if I didn't rock up at my work tomorrow, someone would notice because I matter to them. Like maybe you matter to them because they're like, oh, who's gonna run the store if I don't come to my retail job or something like that. Maybe you matter to them because they worry, what's wrong with Marie? Why didn't she come to work today? In some way you matter, right? You have people in your world in some way. Now, they may not be your people at work. They might be your family. They might be your grandkids. They might be your own children, or your sisters or brothers, or your best friend, or something like that. Or it could be friends at your workplace, right? That matter to you. You care about them. You care if something happens to them. They're not just like, you're not just going about the world with just random acquaintances and no one really matters and no one cares about me. So it's important that you have that in your life. And if you do have that in your life, that's the first part of autonomous motivation. So if you have that, so you feel like you're being included, right? Everyone wants to be part of something, and you have something in your life. Now, the more you have of that, great, right? You might have that in your work, and you just really love, and that's why people love to go to work, because they have that sense of includedness. They have that sense of like, I matter to them, they matter to me. It's not just about the job that we do, right? That is part of, if you want to build a workplace where people wanted to come to it, you will make them matter to you and you matter to them. Okay, the next one is competence, right? So this is partly is the environment that you're in, and it's also the skill that you have, and that could be related to the environment that you're in. So a good example of this is mathematics. Okay, there's a skill that I have some ability in. Now, were I to go into a grade 1 classroom, year 1, right, first year of school, whatever, prep school, whatever they call it in different countries, or you would hope, and it's true that, thank you, my mathematics skill exceeds that limit. So that's actually not helpful for me. To have the competence, so low, to have the level so low that there's no challenge in that for me. But I do have a mastery of that thing, right? So like I have some kind of level of mastery. Now, if I was to go into, I don't know, a trigonometry class or some kind of like advanced physics class or something like that, even probably a non-advanced, just a physics level 1, my level of understanding might be so low, as in my competence in that area is so low that I struggle, right? So I'm struggling. I'm in a state of struggling, right? So competence kind of means that it doesn't have to be in every area of your life. Just use that as an example. So for instance, we could talk the same skill in different environments, means whether I'm struggling or I'm thriving in that environment, right? So you should have a mastery of the things that are important to you. And you sometimes find people struggle to motivate, right? And this is where a practitioner can kind of come in, because they feel like, I don't have competence maybe in anything. And competence could be like, I just don't know what's good for me to do. Like, I want to be healthy, but what is healthy? Like, what? And they're getting stuck in a rabbit hole of, this diet, this thing, that thing. What's right for me to do? So it's got to come back to a trust with your practitioner as well. Like, you've got to find a practitioner that you trust and that you are going to take their advice, and then they might guide you and say, right, let's do this. And so, sometimes you need people to tell you what to do, because it's helping you gain that competence. But then once hopefully that practitioner is helping you to learn about who you are in that aspect, in that area, so that you don't need them forever, and then you're competent in that. Right? Like, I wasn't always competent in Chinese medicine because I didn't know it. So as you learn the information, you kind of know it, then you become, more and more competent. So that's part of it, right? So if you're in an environment that's always challenging you, and you never feel any sense of mastery, let's say you've a good example of this would be, it's a new year, you want to start doing something new for yourself. You just feel like, I don't have the motivation to go do this, a workout program or lose weight or whatever you've decided you want to do. And you just started a new job and it's all hard, right? Like, you can do it, but your competence isn't there. Like, you're struggling a little bit. And it kind of like might be a good struggle because you're learning, but you don't feel any sense of mastery there. So until you get that sense of mastery, you're not going to be in a place to kind of autonomously motivate, and that might even be a few weeks, and then that mastery starts to come in and you feel like it makes you feel confident that you are good at that thing, and that's part of it. So competence is a thing. So it might be just putting the person or putting yourself in the right environment. So I'm not saying go and down 10 levels so that you feel good about yourself, but recognizing that and saying that maybe now isn't the best time for me to make these massive changes in my life because I'm dealing with this other area where I'm trying to regain or I'm trying to gain mastery. So it should be something that's important to you. It might be in your family, right? It might be, things that you're working on. You got teenage kids, and it's you're working on some kind of thing there or something like that, right? So, yeah. I just realised the screen's kind of weird how I've set this thing up. I'm just fixing it. There we go. I don't know why I was set in a little box like that. Just how it does it. Okay, if other people have questions, they can definitely ask them. We're going to get to the last one in a minute, and then we might, if there's no more questions, we'll stop I'll finish the stream. I'm happy to answer people's questions if they have them. Happy New Year. So the last one is autonomy. So when you're doing something autonomously, it's choiceful, it's wholehearted, you want to do it. Okay, now it's like you're fully wholeheartedly behind it. It's something you want to do. You agree with it and you like self-endorse that behavior because you agree with it, right? And so it becomes a part of who you are. You're not doing it there's no sense of reward. Like the reward, if there was a reward involved, that would not matter to you. That wouldn't be part of it. That wouldn't be the reasoning why you're doing it. It's like, I'm doing this anyway because I want to do it. So you enjoy doing it, and that's a big part of it, right? You enjoy doing it. Now, you might start something that you know is good for you, and then find yourself enjoying doing it, right? Like, for instance, I started carnivore again this year, right? So I did carnivore the year before for 100 days. And then I just fell off the wagon because I ate carbs and it was Christmas. And I thought, and now I've realized I don't want to have any of those foods again anymore. And so I'm like, okay, I'm doing a thing called 75 hard again this year. So I started on the 1st of January. And then, so I'm sorry, I just was reading something on the chat there. I'll come to that in a sec. So sometimes you start something, right? Like the exercise for me was not autonomous. I was doing it for the reward or the carrot dangle or whatever it is, right? But then once you get into it, like every day you've decided, I'm going to do this no matter what, I'm going to do it. But then you actually enjoy the actual process. That's part of that is autonomous motivation, right? Like, so you enjoy the way the food tastes, the healthy food, and you're not sort of craving the other food anymore. Well, you're in a state of autonomous motivation there. So there is an aspect, like what Edward Deci and Ryan are saying is like, okay, this is the optimal, this is what we should be aiming for, but there's never going to be a time in your life, I would say. It'd be very hard if you, like, because I said this to my students. I taught this in a psychology class once, and I said, see if you could give yourself that challenge where, everything I do just for one day is autonomously motivated, right? Like, are you going to pay the parking ticket for your car because you want to? Because you choicefully want to do that? No. You do it because you don't want to get a fine. Maybe you love parking, you love paying for parking tickets, right? Or you love whatever that is. Like, there's always things in life that we're going to face that are we're not autonomously motivated. But if we can move things towards that, and sometimes we start an activity or we start a program or something that is controlled motivation to avoid a penalty or get a reward, and then we find ourselves autonomously motivated in it, well, that means you're going to want to perpetuate that activity just for the sake of the activity because you love it so much. So I hope that's been useful and helpful to you, just to kind of understand how that works, right? Because it's super powerful. Like, ultimately at the start of this, I was saying, like, motivation, we want to get that wood element working, right? And these are some things that we can kind of put in place to kind of activate that motivation. All right, I've got another question here. Shantina says, I've struggled with anemia and I've tried so many ways of eating, but not having a gallbladder has been hard to find the best way to eat for health. Yeah. So I'm not a medical doctor, as in a Western medicine doctor. So you might want to check. Just as in, one is I'm not your personal doctor either. You're not your Chinese medicine doctor, but not having a gallbladder doesn't mean you can't eat fatty meats and things like that, or you can't eat fat, right? It just means that you don't have that storage of fat there ready to go, right? So your gallbladder basically is like a little sack that contains all of the bile, and then when your body triggers that it needs it, it just all can kind of come out and meet the demand. But your body will still make it. It just kind of trickles out rather than being just there and to flood the system. And your body will adapt to the food, to the diet, right? It will adapt to things, and it takes time for you to adapt to it as well. So I'll tell you what the basic Chinese medicine diet would be. Whether you have a gallbladder or not, it doesn't make any difference. Like, the diet does not change. We don't say, well, you don't have a gallbladder, so this doesn't apply to you. That's not a part of Chinese medicine. The clear bland diet, that's what we're talking about before. I'm not sure when you jumped into this chat, but before, when I was answering the previous question, we were talking about how to kind of achieve that. So TCM calls it the Qing Dan, right? That's the Chinese medicine. Qing means clear, right? So eliminating. All right. So I'll give you this example. Your spleen and stomach as the cooking pot on the stove. So everything you put into your body takes up energy to be digested. So whatever we can eliminate out of our diet that we don't need. Now, this is a hard one because we might desire something that we don't need. Like sugar, we don't need it. No one needs sugar. Very rarely you need sugar. Again, I said, like, in the Han Dynasty, they did use it as a medicine, but like they're not the sort of people that need that now. Yeah. So, as in, that's a rarity, or it's not a commonality, right? So, we often eat a lot of stuff that is interfering with that process. It's just taking up more energy. So the net gain from the food should be energy, should be surplus, not that you feel so tired from doing the job of digestion. So if your spleen and stomach's struggling, the main symptoms are that you feel bloated and you feel sick after eating, or particularly just bloated or tired. And then the next symptom that happens is as soon as you eat a meal, or very shortly after, you're craving sugar. Like, oh, I got to have a bit of sugar to digest that food. And often that is, and that just like, something just went in my mind there, ding dong, really, really crazily, right? So I've been on the carnivore diet now for, what's the day today? The 12th. So 12 days today, right? The thing I probably struggled the most with is just the quitting alcohol and quitting basic, like at the start, basic carbs, and, you know, like as in just having zero alcohol. Like you go out to a party, you can't even have, like, because I'm doing a program where I'm not having it at all, right? So, but when obviously leading up to this was Christmas, and I knew I was going to make a change, so I literally just went gung-ho on all the shit that I would normally not even eat, right? I normally wouldn't even eat it, but I was like, I'm never going to have this again. Like, in my mind, I was like, I'm going to change in the new year. Like, I'm a very extreme person, if you haven't noticed already, right? And I like to test things out, test out theories and whatever. Anyway, so particularly after Christmas, like, you know, I just let myself have whatever was going, have whatever I wanted. But, you know, like after Christmas, I went to Spudshed, which is like a big supermarket near us, and I just bought a massive family-sized macaroni and cheese. So I ate it all myself, not straight away in one meal, but, you know, over a few days, you know, between Christmas and New Year. I was like, I'm going to have whatever I want. Just eat all this stuff, chocolate, and, you know, people give you that stuff at Christmas, right? I had all these macadamia chocolates and stuff like that, right? But when I just mentioned this now, I realized, like, I haven't craved any of that stuff. Like, and because I was eating that stuff all the time, I would be in that, I'd get you'd sort of be like, oh, where's that chocolate bar? Like, you'd have a meal and then you'd be like, well, you're sitting there watching TV, you're like, where's that chocolate? And actually that thought or that inkling hasn't come to me in the last week, definitely, right? It's been 12 days, so the first few days, yeah, you notice it. I wasn't ever thinking like, where's that chocolate? I was probably thinking, where's that family-sized pasta dish gone? But it's funny how our body will your body will change, okay? And you just have to understand that whatever you decide to do, it's probably going to be hard for the first week, the first few days. Now, if you've got this issue with your gallbladder, like, talk to your practitioner about it. Don't take my advice and just say, oh, Marie said do. Like, don't go against your doctor's advice. But you've just got to decide what you're going to do and just stick on it and give yourself enough time for it to work, right? Before you stop and start. Like, I'm classic with that. Like, I'll be like 3 days, like, it hasn't worked enough. Like, it's not working. Like, even when I used to, like, when I've been sick myself and taken herbs, I'm like, the herbs aren't working. Like, you've only taken 2 doses of them though. My expectations on Chinese herbs is quite high. I'll be just like, I'll drink my herbs and then I'll be like, I'm still there, like, oh, the herbs aren't working, right? So it takes time. It takes time for things to work, right? It takes time for the diet to change. So if you've got anemia, like, you can't say for sure that's blood deficiency in Chinese medicine, but it's very commonly associated. So you want to have bone broth, I would say, is probably the best thing to start with. If you are a vegetarian or a vegan, okay, we'll try and get to the point of, I have had some vegans in my clinic that have been able to have bone broth. And again, I'm not sure what time you jumped into the chat, but I used to be a vegetarian. There was no way I was going to be eating meat. There was no way I was going to be cooking up bone broth. After the first time I cooked up bone broth, I think I put a video on this channel of doing it. And I was like, man, this shit stinks out the house like a bloody meat locker. Like, it really, like, like, you really smells strong. You can buy bone broth made from some butchers, like around the corner from me. One of my butchers makes it in their thing. It's actually one of the cheapest foods you can make for yourself. You get friends with your local butcher and get the bones from them, and then they're organic or grass-fed or whatever that stuff is, right? Not a vegan anymore, but yeah, you might have used to have been a vegan, right? So you might want to look into some carnivore doctors and carnivore diet and stuff like that. That may help you, right? But all that aside, like, I would start with the bone broth because it's something that, like, it's a healing repair. It's a repairing collagen that literally will go in and repair your gut lining. It's so good for your skin. It's full of collagen. Collagen is what your skin needs. So that's good. And in Chinese medicine, we use a herb called Erjiao, which is called donkey hide gelatin. Now, in my clinic, we don't use the donkey hide one because of ethical reasons, is in cruelty to the donkeys. We use bovine gelatin, which is a grass-fed cow gelatin. And it works the same, like, for the stuff we use it for. And in Chinese medicine, like, one of gelatin's main properties that it does, and we're talking not just having a bowl of jelly, like, it's quite a bigger dose within a formula. It wouldn't be just the gelatin by itself, but one of the ways that it works is it tonifies blood to kind of control heavy bleeding. So it's often a herb that's used for people that have heavy menstrual periods and things like that. And when I've consulted with people in countries where herbs, they can't get them, like, I've got a couple of people who wanted to consult with me and they're like, but I can't get herbs here. And I'm like, okay, well, like, we're going to have to really go for the diet stuff in these scenarios, the food things. And so if you had that issue, collagen based, I would try and just make the bone broth yourself rather than take a collagen supplement like that. That's kind of good. Yeah. And so, like, your body will adapt, even though it doesn't have a gallbladder, it will adapt to that. So the clear bland diet is like, okay, avoid anything from a packet, avoid anything that's got like too many colorings or flavorings or even any of those things. I mean, really, you shouldn't have them. If you're not going to do a carnivore or anything like that, then just do meat and vegetables and like plain foods with as little flavor on them when you're cooking them, so that you can taste the natural flavors from the foods. Rather than covering the foods with a lot of sauces and condiments and things like that. That's a good way to start. And then you might find that your body naturally gravitates towards that. So if you've gone from a place of not eating much meat and not eating much fat, and eating lots of carbs and things, like the carbs are inflammatory. Sugar is inflammatory. So you want to get off the sugar and stop having the sugar. And carbs are they are a form of sugar. So as you stop having that, and you're naturally, what you're left with is going to be protein and fat, then your body's going to adapt to that, just albeit slower. So you might do that process in a slower way and see how your body feels, even though you don't have a gallbladder. But so you want mostly warm, cooked and moist, and stay away from cold, dry and raw. That's the basics of Chinese medicine diet therapy. I've got a full video on that topic. It's an older video, but it kind of explains why we would do that. Juicing, no. That's one of the biggest no-nos. Sorry. Juicing is one of the biggest no-nos in Chinese medicine, especially in winter time. If you really love your juice and you can't live without it for some reason or something, you could put ginger into the juice. That would help it be less raw, less cold, I should say. The concept with the juice is, if you could naturally eat that many vegetables or fruits in a one sitting, because let's say you make a glass of juice and it's one sitting, one thing, well, my teacher used to say, well, go for it, eat all that. But most people put almost a box of stuff into their juicer, and then they guzzle all that down, and it's too much concentrated nutrition in one go, which is literally overwhelming the spleen and stomach. It's too much. There is such a concept in Chinese medicine as too much is worse for you than the alternative of what I think I mentioned this maybe earlier on in this stream, but just you want to have everything you take in takes up energy to digest it. So you want to have the least, in herbs we call it the minimum effective dose, right? Think about that with foods. Why are we taking something in if it's not nutritious or beneficial to you, right? And then that leads you to psychological understandings of foods, right? With the things, I was thinking about this last night when I was making my steak, as I do every day now, the same food every day. Food isn't a reward, as in, I feel like I'm rewarded by the steak because I'm not hungry anymore, but not what yummy, delicious treat can I have today? Meat's a yummy, delicious treat in a way. It's not a treat, but it's a staple food, right? But just that concept, right, of it challenges you in that way, right? To think, maybe you were using food as a treat, there wasn't any, and when you're doing things wrong, let's say, or not great, you don't want to listen to good advice. I literally stopped thinking about carnivore diet and following carnivore people for months and months and months, because I was I don't want to, I know I'm not living no, I'm not living the dream here, and I'm just enjoying my family size pasta meal before I stop having this forever. So I'm not saying do that, because that's like people when they quit smoking. Some of my patients I've had where they've quit smoking, and you're like, how are you feeling today? And they're like, well, I smoked 40 cigarettes yesterday because I knew I was going to quit today. So they've kind of smoked everything that they've got the night before. And it's like, yeah, okay, of course you feel like shit house today. That wasn't a great idea. But yeah, so I'm not suggesting that you do that with food. But for some people, it can be almost like grieving process, right? Of well, I'm not going to have this anymore. I'm going to get rid of this out of my life. And look, there is such a thing in medicine, psychology, as what's called the go, no-go reflex, which is it's actually easier for us to do one or the, have a switch thing, yes or no, versus sometimes moderate. Some people find it very hard to moderate things. And I know I'm probably one of those people that finds that hard, because I was listening to another person on YouTube today, something when you tell people they can have a bit of something in moderation, they tend to just go mad for that thing, or they just they think, oh, I'm allowed to have it, so they just have it unlimited. Well, if that's you, then maybe just don't have it at all, because if you can't moderate it, that's hard, right? So it's the same with alcohol, right? Some people just can't moderate that. They're just a yes or a no. It's on or it's off. So kind of like in Chinese medicine, they tend to like that idea of moderation. And I think it's good for us to do that because I think it's a healthy skill to have, right? Like it's a healthy skill to be able to say enough is enough. It's called self-control, right? Discipline. But there is an aspect of the substance you have. Well, does that change your chemistry? Does that change your ability to say no? That's what modern research is kind of getting at when they're thinking of like an alcoholic. Like if they have one drop of alcohol, they can't say no to any more, right? Now, I don't actually agree with that in psychology. Like I don't want to subscribe to that theory, but that is a concept. So if that's the case for you and that substance is detrimental to you and you've decided I don't want to have that, I don't need that in my life anymore, well, just don't have it at all. There's not going to be any benefit to you in trying to moderate something. But in general, like we have to learn how to moderate most things, right? Like there's going to be things that are good for us, but we can do them in excess. Like exercise is a great example, right? In Chinese medicine, you don't want to sweat and sweat and sweat to your detriment. That will be detrimental to you. Like too much exercise might make people very, very deficient over time. Anyway, any other questions that people have, you're welcome to ask them. I think a big aspect of any change you want to make in the new year or any time of the year, it's like you just have to understand it's hard. Like it's going to be, you're not going to expect it to be easy. Like expect it to be hard and then be surprised that it's not hard. That's a good thing. That's a good way to go about it. Because it's hard. These things challenge us, right? They challenge you psychologically. But yeah, if we can draw some kind of help from and support from the self-determination theory, which is like, try to get more relatedness in your life, have more people that care, find the reasons to belong and be connected with others, matter to people, they matter to you. Find that balance of competence and, that kind of like aspect of, where you feel comfortable in your competence, so that you're sufficiently challenged, but not, overly taxed is probably a good way to put it. And then, autonomous, like try and do things that are choiceful, like find that choiceful of your own volition aspect to things. I've got to get to my exercise today because I've still got my 2 workouts to go. Sunday afternoon here in Perth. I like the lazy Sunday day. I've kind of been accustomed to that bit of sleep in, bit of just doing whatever I want. I like having one day a week where I don't plan anything, and that's what Sunday is now. Usually, it might be a Monday, but I work on Mondays now. So, it's great to have a day. I find that just helpful, and I was like, I'm going to do a live stream today because I've sorted all my gear out. Feeling motivated. I was just autonomously motivated to do a stream today. But I did say that I was going to do a live stream regularly. So I'll try and do it on the Thursday. For Perth time, it'll be Thursday afternoon. That means it'll be Wednesday night in the US. That's kind of what I'll probably do. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Last call. This is it. And then we'll close off for today. I wish you all Happy New Year. And hope that today's been useful and helpful to you. If it has, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can put a question here if you're watching afterwards, and I'll endeavour to answer it in a different stream. That's probably a good idea, and we can do that. But I like these kind of streams where we can have a bit of back and forth with people, which is kind of great. All right, happy days.